this is going to be the cropping tutorial. So first thing we want to do is go over to the left toolbar area, and we're going to select the crop tool, which looks like this one. And if you click and hold, by the way, you can also do a perspective crop tool, which is nice. And these slicing tools, they're a little bit different. Those are primarily for doing things with web. But right now we're going to use the regular crop tool. And I want you to see that now you can drag in, and it's going to give you a grid. And the reason it's giving you a grid to look at, so we're going to drag in as close as we can get, first of all. And then I'm going to show you how to rotate it, but back to the grid. The reason that we get a grid is because we could choose to do different types of grids. This you see up here under View, it says Rule of Thirds. And you see that there are lots of different options. A rule of thirds is a basic design principle about what looks good and where things should be considered as a placement for the focal point based on rule of thirds. Generally, you don't want to place things dead center of the image, and there's a reason that people refer to it as dead center. It generally makes the image very static. So we'll talk about that some more probably later, but right now that's what the grid is all about. And you can get different grids if you wanted to look at the different grid options. Okay, but we'll leave ours on rule of thirds. Now, you can go ahead and see in my corner, as I hover, you see I can turn it into, if I hover in just the right spot, I can turn it into a little curved arrow. That means that it's going to let me rotate the image in a way that I can align it with the grid shape so that I can crop it as accurately as possible. And so that looks pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and drop it. So what I did was I clicked, I held, and I rotated, and then I let off of the mouse. Okay, so that now this is how it'll look, and if I hit the return key or the enter key, it commits to that cropping. And now what I can do is I can drag my crop lines in even closer so that I'm really and truly cropping the image as much as possible. So let's go ahead and do that. As much as possible without losing too much of the image is what I meant to say. Okay, and then to commit to that, I hit return again. And so now the image is cropped properly. And that's a really simple way of doing it. Another way, if you wanted to crop, is you could also go up to where it says unconstrained while the crop tool is selected. You could also go down here and select size and resolution. And you could put in a specific height and width and resolution that you wanted to crop it to, and it would go ahead and do that for you. It would give you a crop box that you could move around. So that's another option. And just so you know, I didn't show you this in the last video, but if you want to do a crop while you're in the Camera Raw screen, there's also a crop tool. I mentioned the crop tool, but I didn't show you how to use it. It's basically the same. You can select the crop tool in the Camera Raw view where you are changing the color, white balance, and the exposure and so forth, and you could actually crop it there if you wanted to. Okay, so that's how you can do a basic crop of an image, and also to straighten it up. And the one other thing that I was going to mention to you is over in the crop tool, if you click and hold it, the perspective crop tool will show up. And the reason that you might want to use this is if, let's say that you take a picture, let's say of a painting on a wall. Well, sometimes your camera's not perfectly straight or perfectly up and down. You know, it might have some kind of angle to it, and so you're going to get a slightly distorted image. It won't necessarily be a perfect rectangle or a perfect square. And in that case, what you can do is when you're cropping, you can draw your crop box and you can drag in a single corner to where the picture might actually end. And what Photoshop will do is it still is going to crop it in a perfect rectangle or square, depending on the dimensions of your piece, but it will approximate those pixels and it will stretch them and it will make it look like it's actually straight. So I'm going to hit the escape key to get out of that, but that's how you use the perspective crop tool. And that'll do it for our demo on cropping.